We're going to have a panel discussion now, and the first speaker is working for Merck Serono, and she's responsible for web governance in the entire world. Director e-media and social media communications, one of the few people who actually has social media in a job title. She has something to do with phones and planes, but you might want to ask her that self. May I please have on stage Gillian Tachibana. She will be joined by somebody who's living in beautiful Switzerland, and apparently she likes to travel. She says she is a news junkie, and I think we are more or less all news junkies because there's so much information. She worked for Edelman. She's a strategic communications specialist. May I have on the stage, please, welcome Wendy Woods-Williams. And we're going to talk about using digital channels for corporate communications to engage and educate customers. And René, who you've seen before, most probably will chair the session.
Yes, thank you, Eric. I'm very honored and privileged to have a complete female panel on stage here. Very glad to hear the women's opinions on this complicated matter. And as the title says, we're going to talk about the use of digital channels to engage and educate customers, but then from a corporate communications perspective. Now, Wendy, may I start with you? What is your experience so far in engaging through digital channels from your position within corporate communications?
So I have an interesting role within the corporate communications team at Amgen in our international headquarters, and a bit of a jack of all trades because I sit in terms of the product team corporate communications role, but I also have a special emphasis in digital and link in very closely with our global Center of Excellence digital team. And so I would say that my experience so far has been one of trying to move people forward in some ways, I think, and looking at how we can look at digital and social media as part of the integrated marketing mix, and how do we make decisions on when it makes sense to use or engage in digital and social media, and when maybe does it not make sense, and what are some of the factors that we have to consider from a corporate reputation standpoint, because that's obviously key kind of to me and to the function where I live. So I think that's...
And can you give a concrete example of what you've developed in the past?
Yeah, I would say I've been very closely involved in working around and developing some of our social media guidelines and how we roll that out within our affiliate to both our communications colleagues and some of our marketing colleagues, but also in looking at I would say how we both. What are the ways that we can engage externally? So knowing, with patients, obviously we have restrictions in terms of how we can communicate for the right reasons. And so we've done a bit more work in perhaps partnering with some of our third parties, patient organizations, and looking at how we can help them and use our skills and expertise to help them perhaps engage in ways that they wouldn't normally. And we've also been looking at how we engage with healthcare professionals. So are there, more closed channels that we can, that our legal and regulatory colleagues feel comfortable with us engaging in a way that we can share our expertise and the information that we have available. So those are some specific initiatives that I've been a part of in my time so far at Amgen.
Actually, for you, Gillian, the same question. What is your experience so far in engaging through digital channels from your position within corporate communications?
Yeah. Engaging has been extremely difficult, I would say, for particularly for Merck Serono. As some of you may know, Merck Serono is a biopharmaceutical division of a much larger company that's a pharmaceutical and a chemicals company. And as the responsible for pharma communications on digital, it's been very challenging to try and get the upper management or the core management of our organization to understand what steps we need to take in regards to our particular industry.
Now, before we go more into that, do you also have a concrete example of what you've done in the past in engaging and educating customers in this way?
Well, the customers in our case at this point is internal. We often forget the internal customer when we're facing the external customer. The reason why we are putting so much emphasis on the internal customer, therefore our colleagues, our employees, is because if we want to engage engage with the external audience, they need to understand just how much commitment and how much resource that it takes for social media.
So then, it's not so straightforward then going out and engage with patients and with physicians. So what you're actually saying is you should start internally. So what is the process you go through then? How do you go towards developing these channels?
We have a certain number of educational tools, and I think about a few years ago we started a program for Enterprise 2.0, so that was to bring in the social media aspects internally. We do have different tools right now. We're also in the process of reconsolidating our new intranet so that we have one collaborative platform instead of many different fragmented tools. But what we've had to go through a very long process with legal and regulatory and with human resources, even to be able to, let's say, tweet internally, to comment other articles that were being published on the intranet. So this is, I think, a learning process that we're bringing our colleagues, at least bringing it to their attention, that it's just not that easy. What you wouldn't say or tweet back to a CEO, you're not going to tweet in the same manner externally.
Wendy, do you have the same experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a lot of the education work that we've been trying to do, culturally, is to show that if we're engaging and we're posting articles on our internet and just winning that battle of being able to open up comments and having our legal and regulatory teams feel comfortable with that and see that the world is not going to end by because actually the comments, as they always say, social media, that people behave very much in the way that they would do in the normal world. So people are kind and quite positive, and the feedback that you get, even if it is a challenge, is important because it's a dialogue versus just kind of mandating. So I think we've had a lot of good learning from those experiences, but it's definitely an ongoing process. I think one of the things we talked about a bit earlier, what we've tried to do is create kind of an upfront cross-functional team that any project that comes forward from a digital or social media standpoint comes before this team to talk about it in concept, and so we can really challenge and play devil's advocate and talk about, what are the resources that would be needed to run this program over the long term? What could be the reputational risk if something goes wrong? Are we prepared to take that risk? If we're talking about any kind of disease awareness or products, how do we build the right kind of monitoring into those things? So trying to have those conversations up front, so it's a much more strategic decision versus necessarily a team deciding we want to do X, let's go off and kind of run with that idea.
That's correct. I mean, that's something that I'd like to build upon, because the reason why we have web governance in Merck Serono is to do just that. And part of our process, the number one step of the process, is to submit an idea, and then we start working on it with the brand team or with the specific team that wants to start their digital program.
Because, and you mentioned it, but to put a little more emphasis on it from your position, what are you actually achieving or guarding, so to say, from your position within corporate communications?
Reputation.
Yeah, reputation. We're always looking at the reputation, but positive and the negatives. And I think, a lot of the conversation earlier was talking about measuring programs and return on investment. And I think we look at things, of course, when we're talking to our brand teams, we're also looking at those types of measurements, but we're looking at things in a slightly different perspective, or a slightly different lens from a corporate communications standpoint than maybe you are from a marketing team perspective. So,
but I can imagine that brings internally a lot of discussion. How do you, what I get the feeling that is, what you've been done in the past few years, is it more than evangelizing with the organization rather than developing channels to communicate with the external customer?
I would say yes. I think that's, in terms of within each team and of course across the organization, you have people who are, both have the expertise maybe from prior lives or also just from their own personal interest in the way that we probably all do in this room. But there's definitely a lot of evangelizing that needs to be done, and I definitely could feel the person who commented earlier in the session about the people at the top really needing to kind of get that education piece, because I think in some cases people in various teams who are more old school marketers who look at what needs to be done from a, how do we develop the detail aid and how do we make sure the positioning's right, don't necessarily think about that integrated marketing mix in the way that we might, so.
So actually that's a sort of a classic discussion, how difficult it is to change. And in the audience here, because I don't have to confront you that this is very interesting to investigate our possibilities as pharma companies to get involved in the digital interactive media. But how many of you really have the feeling that your upper management is absolutely convinced, or let me rephrase, that really has the feeling that they understand the dynamics that new social and digital interactive media brings? Hands. That is just, let me put that again. raise your hands, all of you. This is interesting. Raise your hands, please. Now, who think that your management does not understand the dynamics of interactive digital media? Keep your hands up. That's a different picture than I saw before. At least that there is some hesitation here. That's a bit... Does anyone want to comment on that?
But they think they understand. That's the main point.
They think they understand. And what makes you say that you think they understand?
Because in any corporation, be it pharma or any other, food substances, every corporation is trying to include new technologies all the time, keeping up with their competitors. But a lot of the time, they're not incorporating the right strategies to do that. And as I was saying before, it's the guys at the top level who make the big decisions about what you're going to do at a marketing level. They're the ones who have any impact on what we're doing as marketeers and what we want to do. We can't implement our own digital strategies either locally or globally because they just don't understand what digital and social media is. But they think that they do.
Well, that is an interesting... How is that? Can you elaborate further, Gillian? Was that your experience, let's say, some time ago, or how is that situation?
No, not at all. In fact, I think we're quite fortunate to have an executive management that's really interested in social media and the impact that it can have on reputation. I also believe, and I thought about what she had said, is that it depends also on the size of the company and also the priorities that the management is giving to the company. Naturally, if the priorities are much different than looking at the reputation and it's more about financial solvability, then they're not going to be looking into social media, or at least that's the easiest part to cut. As far as our management is concerned, they're very interested in knowing the return on investment first. And therefore, they wanted to know where are we being talked about, who's talking about us, and who our influencers are. So the whole point of that exercise is to also find out exactly where are we going to put our investment in social media. Do we make our own platforms, or do we utilize the platforms that are already out there? And so the most important exercise for our company was to monitor, was to listen. And we've been doing this for the past 2 years. We do have an idea, in fact, I won't tell you, but we do have an idea exactly where we're going to be seen and heard in the next 2 quarters, and which kind of campaigns we're going to be running from those platforms. But it's very important to know what's being said about you and why is it being said about you. I think the other thing that's quite important to understand is the tone. Because, machines and algorithms can pick up positive and negative, but they can't pick up certain tone. They can't pick up sarcasm. And therefore, to really use the human resources to read some of the comments that are being said about your company is very important. There's something that we've taken a look, and we benchmarked against our own media monitoring, which is just press releases and commentaries from journalists. And it's the same thing. You need to go back and read exactly the tone of those comments coming from those journalists. Is it a positive or is it a negative feeling?
How many resources does that take?
It takes a lot of resources, unfortunately. And I think this is where then management also seems to cut. It's in the human resources aspect of it. It's not that easy just asking for money and then saying we're going to hire a third-party company. The third-party company doesn't know your business all the time, and therefore you need to work very closely with the third-party companies so that they understand your business, understand what your objectives are and what you're trying to achieve. As your question was again?
Well, how much resources that takes?
It takes not just third-party companies, but in terms of our resources, I was given a team of 5 people. So at least for our particular part of the division, which is about 17,500 employees, we're only 5 to be able to do this from our corporate division. And then we do have within the affiliates other people who then also share the information with us. So yeah, it does take real resources, but this is, fortunately, our management recognized it.
Well, that's at least a big leap forward.
Yes, but I would, if I did my own capacity planning, I need 3 more people.
So how hard do you have to fight for your resources, Wendy?
I think it's similar. I think across probably corporate communications, you hear a similar tale. For the team that I work with that handles international communications is a group of 4 people, and we handle communications for everything outside of the US, including emerging markets. So, you know, if you look at that, the kind of and trying to monitor and stay on top of that, it's definitely it's time intensive and resource intensive. But I think I would say the same, that our management definitely understands the need and the reason that you want to monitor what our key influencers are saying about us, because that's the way to make, you know, smart strategic decisions. So.
Well, but you can't blame your management to be that they challenge you. If you ask for resources, then they say, well, why do you need those resources? If you look for alternatives, like Gillian mentioned, you can outsource. What would you outsource and what would you definitely not outsource?
I mean, I think it's exactly what you were just saying, that there's a certain piece that an external partner can help you with in terms of just the sheer volume of looking at, you know, sifting through and being able to give you a kind of an overview or a snapshot. But yeah, they don't understand the ins and outs of your business in the same way. And so to really kind of understand, and no one knows your key stakeholders better than you do. So I think you can take a more critical eye on some of that information than probably an external partner can help you to do.
The actual act of monitoring and getting that information, the data, should be done externally. The analysis could be done in tandem with an external agency, but it does depend on you as well to know exactly which campaigns you were targeting, which dates that something specifically happened that you want to see the level of conversation go up and down.
And we're going to talk about monitoring. I think it is in the next session. We're going to dive in more detail into monitoring. Going back to, and I think that's very interesting that you're guarding the reputation of the company. Now, how are you prepared? And I put it bluntly, when the shit hits the fan. And no, really. I mean, let me give you an example. 2 years ago, there were 3 recalls in 1 year from Toyota, from different failures from their cars, which actually people got killed because of these failures. At that time that happened, they were not really present in social media. Fortunately enough, they were in the years of developing a process, so they were able to get involved very rapidly. Now, but in potential, if something happens which is open to the public, and pharma doesn't always have that good reputation, how would you get involved in those social media conversations, guarding your reputation? Is that possible to start with? And if so, how do you do that?
Well, we have crisis communication plans. We also have a process to report that. And as far as the specific brand teams concerned who have social media campaigns, we sit on their brand teams, and we also ask them, require that they have a crisis communication campaign, which then ties into our corporate crisis communication campaign.
I would say I've been working on a training program this past year that we've rolled out to all of our leadership within Europe, and it's been focused specifically on crisis communications. But what we've tried to build in is exactly that element of social media, and trying to show them very real examples of how, you know, in their minds they sometimes think you have an hour to respond or 24 hours to respond to something, depending on the level of what an issue might be, and you know, I think our role as corporate communications and how we are the guardians of reputation, we've tried to show them exactly what's happening in social media and how you have minutes to be prepared. So you have to do that in advance. You know, you have to think about how you can use those channels. What would you use or not use? Those discussions need to have already happened before anything were to necessarily take place, because you don't want to be wasting time making those kind of conversations after the fact. Because that's, you know, if you look at Toyota and many other examples, that's actually, you know, if you're slow to respond, not seen present in the conversation, that does more damage than anything, clearly. So we try to look at ways that we can, you know, manage that. But I do think that that's been a huge change, or a huge education piece, again, in terms of crisis communications, because I think it used to be very specific of, you have your plan in place, and you have your media responses, and, you know, you have your kind of Q&As and guidance, and that's just not the way the world works anymore. So
do you have, as part of your crisis plan, there is a part social media in there, which is you just push the button the moment something happens. Who has that as well? Who has a crisis plan ready, also including not the standard press releases and sort of, but do have social media involved in there? Who does have crisis plan? Nobody. Well, you're very fortunate then. What is the advice? Is it then over? Is it exaggerating to have a crisis plan ready? Because most of the people here in the room don't have a plan, or at least not aware of it.
Well, it's always good to be prepared. I mean, we talk about return on investment, and this is also part of the return on investment. I mean, did we have an excellent exit strategy? We've seen so many social media campaigns from pharma who just end up disappearing. They take off their Facebook page, and there has been no exit strategy. Everyone who was following them or friending with them, commenting or trying to comment on their page, they no longer know where to go. So at least if you have also part of the crisis communications plan an exit strategy to bow out gracefully, or where the patients or your friends and followers can actually refer to after that, after your page is shut down, then I think that helps a great deal for your reputation.
I was just going to say, I know that sometimes I think the instinct from some senior management, as we were talking earlier, sometimes they will see an example from another company of something that's happened that's maybe gone wrong, and their immediate reaction is, let's pull it all, everything we're doing, let's shut everything down. And so what we've also tried to do is educate that, yeah, we also need to be prepared for our, you know, not our own activities, but what's happening within the industry. But we can't be knee-jerk. We have to assess what the situation is, and for exactly those reasons, if we also disappear, then that impacts our reputation, and we have to determine what that, you know, what the risk to that is, and how the individuals that we engage with, what that will do over time, both in the short and long term. So
actually, what I understand is, before you can use, from your position, digital channels to engage your external customers, you need to understand internally what these channels are about, the dynamism that they have, how you need to respond and act on that, but further than just marketing and corporate communications. So you need to create awareness organization-wide. Is there, who is in that process from you in really getting your whole organization involved in social media, new media, and the dynamism that it brings? Who is limiting their activities mainly to marketing and corporate communications? I saw a very hesitant hand here, is that right?
Yeah, corporate communications for us is, because of the regulations that we're working under, we're focusing more on the CSR messages and recruitment activity.
External?
Yeah, in an external environment, yeah. Using the social tools to support recruitment activity.
But do you think that, let's say, apart from HR and apart from corporate communications, that other departments are really aware of the dynamics that new and social media bring?
I'd say it's an uphill battle. but people are getting more aware of the terminology and starting to feel more comfortable talking about it. But there's a definite bandwagon that people try to jump on, and that's part of my role has been to say, let's not jump on the bandwagon, let's do it for the right reasons, and these are some of the benefits it can bring to the organisation, which is where the recruitment side of things came in. That's where I can demonstrate return on investment, I hope. Just starting out, but I'm hoping that's where I'm going to see some benefit to the company in terms of financials that they can get on board with, which will then drive some more interest in the other activities.
I'm always surprised that always the ROI ghost pops up several times from a way understanding. But another, what I think is, if you look at new and social media, interactive digital media, then very often it's so easy to point out to ROI. But if you talk about social, I mean, I was at a meeting in Boston earlier this year, an Enterprise 2.0 meeting, and a guy from the community manager from Lowe's, as a big retail chain in the US, said, but the ROI discussion, yes, I have it, but partially. I mean, there's so much more. I mean, if you talk about social and digital interaction with each other, how do you measure that in hard coins? I mean, how do you measure the success of your marriage? Was something that I really liked him saying. Do you think with your programs, no, mate, seriously, imagine you have a crisis in your marriage and you go for counseling. Which counselor will you pick? The guy that says, we do 6 sessions and I guarantee your marriage success will go up by 25%.
Don't tweet it.
Don't tweet it. How far do you think that in the long period of awareness, evangelizing, getting discussions, and education programs is preparing you for your organization to really explore the possibilities to start communicating, or maybe more communicating to the outside world? That's a difficult question.
Yeah, no, I think it is. It's a long process, and it does. I mean, because it does go hand in hand with the ROI conversation, and I think you don't have one without the other, which makes sense when I think there are always difficult decisions being made in terms of where to invest resource and what do you look at. So I can completely understand that that's what happens, but I think digital social media, it's the same conversations I've been doing PR my whole life. It's the same conversations I've been having my entire career. How do you measure the impact of what we've done? Because it's credible, it's external. It's not just the hard numbers. It's the engagement. It's the influence. It's the how did this impact a policy decision or change a behavior. That's if somebody cracks that holy grail, they'll make a lot of money.
Yep. And
Are there from the audience any questions? None? Yes.
Be very interested to hear what the panel thinks about J&J's efforts to get back into the conversation. Been following this for a couple of years, and I've been very impressed by the way that they put a human face on their company. I'm sure you're familiar with Mark Monceau. And the fact that they empowered this guy, giving him the freedom to actually blog within limits, but that's what he does, to tweet. What do you think of that approach? And is this something you would like to emulate?
We've actually spoken about that quite a few times, and HR was involved in that as well. The thing is that the personality of the company then becomes who the employee is. They become the face of the company. And while we see a lot of value in that, if that employee decides to leave, there goes correct, which Mark has. There goes the company's personality as well. So therefore, I think the reason why we've put a lot of emphasis on the educational programs is to have more than just one face of the company, and it's to create a larger personality. I know that a lot of our marketing or brand teams that do have their social media campaigns, they have third-party companies behind it. That's not the company's personality, and therefore what we want to build is a real personality with real people behind it, and it's also part of our brand campaign as a company.
I would agree, and I do think that there's a lot to be learned from that, even if it's not just specifically about the person. I think it is about the personality, because, you know, I think, of course, you look at the people that you follow on Twitter, you're more interested and engaged with people who have something interesting to say and who have a personality versus those who are just perhaps, you know, tweeting their latest data or press releases, et cetera. And I think it's just it's a very fine line to walk, and it's a difficult, you know, it's often a difficult conversation with the regulatory and legal teams on how you can make that a reality. So I think it's definitely, I know for us, it's something that we're still struggling with in terms of how do we make that happen. But I think the approach that you're talking about in terms of making it more than one face, so that so you truly do get to kind of a sense of the company and the culture, that's inherently what we're trying to do. Whether we've achieved it yet.
Okay, I think we have room for one more question.
Hi, I'm a journalist. I'm Katrina Meggett from Pharma Times magazine. I went to a media advisory board for a pharma company a couple of months ago, and they asked for our advice about using social media for a resource tool for journalists. And I said to them, wouldn't it be better to put that money towards a resource tool for this particular drug for patients? And they hadn't even considered that. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts were on the differences in using social media for the two types of stakeholders.
Well, as we don't know what the context is of that particular product or the discussion, was the discussion around, you know, was it an open platform? What kind of resources was it entailing?
It's medical education, so awareness, resource tools for the journalists so that they knew the background of this particular drug, the disease area, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that sounds like an integrated digital approach to disease education. That doesn't seem to be, you know, anything new, whether it's social media or even on a static website. I have no opinion on that.
No, I mean, I would only say that I think, yeah, when it comes to more disease awareness and sharing of information, I think historically we are comfortable with that, and obviously there are a lot of examples of that within pharma, but I think that it's when it becomes a two-way conversation, because obviously right now that's highly regulated in what we can and can't share about products specifically, and so then and then leaning into disease, I think that's where sometimes our regulatory and legal colleagues are hesitant to maybe get into that two-way conversation. So I think, you know, of course, we want to provide information that's valuable and relevant to people who are interested, but sometimes it's just a matter of it not being kind of appropriate based on our guidelines. So.
There is one aspect, though, that we've seen as adding value is to add the pharmacovigilance numbers or the medical information numbers for patients to be able to contact.
Okay, I think we have to leave it to that. I want to thank you very much for your participation and for all the valuable input. Thank you very much.
Okay, how do we get there?